The key grates in the lock, a familiar metallic complaint. Another Tuesday buried. I push the door open, and the apartment's heat hits me like a physical blow. It's a wall of stale air, smelling of old pipes and the coffee I forgot to dump this morning. Outside, the storm that's been threatening all day has finally broken. Rain slashes against the 7th floor window, a frantic, endless drumming. I kick the door shut behind me. The bolt clicks with a sound of finality. Home. My briefcase drops to the floor with a heavy thud. The strap on it is about to give. Just like everything else, I loosen my tie, the silk knot feeling like a hangman's noose. Across the hall, Mrs. Gable starts her nightly ritual. A cough. Dry, rhythmic, like a metronome marking the slow decay of this entire building. Hack. Pause. Hack. It's a sound that crawls right under my skin. I walk past the kitchenette, a space barely big enough for a hot plate and a small fridge. The fridge hums, a low, constant vibration. My eyes land on the pile of blueprints on the small dining table. The Braxton Project, a mountain of revisions, a client who thinks he's a Medici, and a deadline that feels like a gun to my head. My heart is pounding, a dull, anxious beat that's been my companion for months. I need a drink. My gaze sweeps the living room. The worn armchair, the bookshelf crammed with paperbacks I haven't touched in years, the television screen, dark and blank as a slab of obsidian, and the rug, a cheap, beige thing I bought online. Something is on the rug. I stop. It's small, in the very center, perfectly placed. It doesn't belong. My first thought is a mouse, or a massive cockroach. This building has both. But it's not moving. It's just there. Moving cautiously, trying not to make a sound, I step closer. My eyes struggle to focus in the dim light from the single lamp I leave on. It's not a bug. It's metal. Red. It's a car. A toy car. My mind went blank. What is this? A die-cast metal car? A little racer. Not new. The red paint is chipped along the fenders. A tiny silver lightning bolt is painted on the hood, faded and worn. My throat is dry. I know this car. I haven't seen it in 30 years. It was my favorite. Lost. Gone. My mother and I searched the entire house, the yard, everywhere. It just vanished one afternoon, and now it's here, on my floor, 7 stories up in a city hundreds of miles from that childhood home. This is impossible. Is this a joke? My head is spinning with a series of questions. Who could have gotten in? The door was locked. I checked it twice this morning. The landlord? For what? To leave a 30-year-old toy on my rug? It was an utter absurdity. I scanned the room again. The window is locked. The fire escape is slick with rain. There's nowhere to get in. I crouch down. My knees crack. My hand trembles as I reach for it. The metal is cold, heavy, real. I turn it over in my palm. A small scratch on the undercarriage, right next to the tiny stamped logo. I made that scratch myself with a compass point from my dad's desk. I remember the sharp sting of guilt. I remember hiding the compass. My whole body froze. This isn't a replica. This is it. The one. How can this be? Flicker. The lamp on the end table dies. The room plunges into blackness. I'm on my knees in the dark, clutching a ghost from my past. My heart is pounding in my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs. I can hear the rain, the wind. I can hear Mrs. Gable's coughing, a muffled, persistent beat through the wall. Flicker. The light comes back, buzzing weakly, and with the light comes the whisper. It's not from the vent, not from the hallway. It's closer. So close, it feels like it's being spoken directly into the canal of my ear. A child's voice, high and clear. "You found it!" Reflexively, I scramble backward, crab walking on the floor, my shoes scuffing the wood. My back hits the leg of the armchair. Hard. Pain shoots up my spine. My eyes dart to the darkest corner of the room by the bookshelf. A space cluttered with shadows. There was absolutely no one there. Nothing. "Ready to play?" The voice again. Same tone. Calm. Intimate. I push myself up, my legs shaking, my back pressed against the wall. My eyes scanned the room, desperate, frantic. The kitchen. The hallway to the bedroom. Nothing. No one. "Who's there?" My own voice sounds foreign, strained. Silence. Only the storm. The cough. The hum of the fridge. I'm losing my mind. That's it. Stress. The Braxton deadline. Sarah's last email. It's all piling up. I'm having an auditory hallucination. People crack. It happens. I'm just an architect drowning in debt, not a bastion of mental fortitude. I need to ground myself. Logic. There is a logical explanation for this. There has to be. I take a deep breath. The air is so thick that breathing is difficult. I look at the toy in my hand. It's not a hallucination. It's solid. It's real. So, who? Who put it here? Who is behind all this? I walk to the front door, step by step. The floorboards creak. I check the deadbolt. It's still thrown. The chain is still on. I lean my forehead against the cool wood of the door, closing my eyes. Get a grip, Jake. Get a goddamn grip. Maybe I brought it with me, in an old box from my last move. Maybe it fell out of something. Yes, that could be it. I must have unpacked an old box, and it rolled out, and I just didn't see it until now. It's a flimsy explanation, but it's an explanation. It's something to hold on to. But the voice. A hallucination can't whisper in your ear. It can't ask you if you're ready to play. Cold sweat breaks out on the back of my neck. I turn from the door. My gaze goes back to the corner. The shadows there seem deeper now, thicker. I feel as if an invisible hand is squeezing me. I swallow hard. The whisper comes again, from that same corner. It's softer this time, almost conspiratorial. A secret just for me. "It's okay, Jake. I know you didn't mean to hurt him." My blood froze. Hurt who? What is this all about? My mind races, flipping through a Rolodex of failures and regrets. Fights with Sarah, arguments with my father, clients I've pissed off. The voice continues, a silken thread of sound weaving through the noise of the storm. "He just ran out so fast, right in front of your bike." I couldn't believe my ears. My soul flew away. No, it can't be. It can't know that. That memory is buried under 30 years of packed earth. A secret kept by an 8-year-old boy, so tightly locked away that even I barely remembered it. "You heard him yelp." The voice is insistent now, a nail being hammered into my skull. "You felt the bump." My hand, the one holding the car, is shaking uncontrollably. I can see it. The flash of brown and white fur. The excited barking from Mrs. Henderson's yard. The gate left open. My red Schwinn, new and fast. I was showing off, no hands. I remember the sick thud under the front wheel, the high-pitched cry that was cut short. I remember falling, scraping my own knee on the pavement to create a distraction. A lie. I told them he ran away. I watched Mrs. Henderson, a sweet old woman, call his name every evening for 2 weeks. I watched her put up flyers. I never said a word. "Buddy," the voice whispers. The name hangs in the air of my apartment, an indictment. His name was Buddy. I stood rooted to the spot. Time seemed to stop. No one knew that name. I never wrote it down. I never spoke it again after that day. Not to my parents. Not to a priest. Not to Sarah. Not to a single living soul on this planet. It was a cancer I had carried alone. A shiver runs down the spine. This isn't stress. This isn't a breakdown. Something is wrong here. Something is in this room with me. My eyes are glued to the corner. The shadows aren't just shadows anymore. They are coalescing. A shape is gathering in the darkness, a form that is darker than the dark around it. I can't make out a face. I can't make out any details. But I know, with a certainty that steals the breath from my lungs, that it's watching me. The toy car in my hand suddenly feels like it's burning. A cursed object. A key that has unlocked a door that should have remained shut forever. I want to throw it, to smash it against the wall. But my fingers won't obey. They are clamped tight around the chipped red paint and the faded lightning bolt. The coughing next door stops. The sudden absence of the sound is more jarring than its presence. In the void it leaves, there is only the rain, my own ragged breathing, and the terrible knowing silence from the corner of my room. The shadows in the corner did not move. They thickened. It was as if someone had poured a jug of ink into a glass of water. The darkness deepened, swirled, and then began to hold a shape. My breath hitched in my throat. My eyes burned from not blinking, trying to dissect the impossible thing that was happening in front of me. It wasn't fast. It was a slow, deliberate gathering. First, a silhouette. Small, the size of a child. Then, details began to resolve themselves out of the gloom, like a photograph developing in a dark-room tray. A pair of worn-out sneakers. Then denim pants, a flash of pale skin at the ankles. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. A red t-shirt, a baseball shirt with faded gray 3/4 sleeves. I knew that shirt. My gaze traveled upwards. A thin neck, a face pale as bone, framed by a messy mop of brown hair, just like mine used to be. And the eyes. The eyes were black pits, bottomless and ancient, holding a terrifying stillness. A small mouth curved into a faint, polite smile that did not touch the coldness in those eyes. He was just there, not leaning against the bookshelf, not standing on the floor. He occupied the space, a fixed point in reality that hadn't been there a second ago. He was 8 years old forever. He was Pip. My mind screamed, "No, this isn't real. It's a waking nightmare. My brain is misfiring, cooked by stress and too much caffeine. The guilt over the dog. Buddy. It was a seed planted long ago, and now it was sprouting into this monster. This is a hallucination. It has to be. A logical, explainable, psychological event. I broke my gaze from the corner. A monumental act of will. I turned my back on it. My back pressed against the wall, the cool plaster a flimsy shield. I refused to look. If I don't look, it's not there. Simple. My own mind is a territory I can control. I am an architect. I build things with rules, physics, materials. logic. This follows no rules. Therefore, it does not exist. My legs felt like they were filled with wet sand, but I forced them to move. One step, then another. I walked stiffly toward the kitchenette. My eyes were fixed on the counter. The dirty coffee mug, the roll of paper towels. Normal things. Real things. I needed a drink. A real drink. Something to burn this fantasy out of my head. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely grab the bottle of whiskey from the counter. The cap squeaked as I twisted it open. I didn't bother with a glass. I raised the bottle to my lips, the smell of cheap grain and artificial caramel filling my nostrils. The liquid was fire in my throat, a welcome, searing pain. It was real. I could feel it. I took another long pull, gagging slightly. You never liked the taste. The voice was right behind me. So close I felt a cold spot form between my shoulder blades. My whole body froze. I choked on the whiskey, a fine spray erupting from my lips. I spun around, the bottle slipping from my grasp and clattering into the sink. There was absolutely no one there. The space behind me was empty. The path to the living room was clear. But you always liked how it made you forget, Pip's whisper continued. This time it came from the living room, from the armchair. I risked a glance. He was sitting on the armrest now, his legs dangling, not quite touching the cushion. He hadn't walked there. He was just there. He swung his feet gently, a parody of childish innocence. The motion was soundless. My head is spinning with a series of questions. How? What is this? I stumbled away from the kitchenette, moving sideways like a crab, keeping my eyes on him. I went into the short hallway that led to the bedroom and bathroom. I needed to break the connection. I needed a different room, a different view. I lurched into the bathroom and slammed the door shut. The click of the lock was loud in the small tiled space. I leaned against the door, my chest heaving. Cold sweat was breaking out on the back of my neck. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. In here, there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the steady drumming of the rain. No whispers. No smiling, pale boy. Okay, Jake. Ground yourself. I turned on the faucet, the rush of water a comforting roar. I cupped my hands and threw cold water on my face. Once. Twice. The shock was electric. I gasped, water dripping from my chin onto my shirt. I gripped the edges of the sink, my knuckles white. I looked up. In the mirror, my own reflection stared back. Wild-eyed, pale, hair a mess. A man on the edge. But just me. I was alone. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost made my knees buckle, washed over me. It was a hallucination. I was overstimulated. I was cracking up. But I was alone. I could handle cracking up. I could call a doctor tomorrow. I could get help. I stared at my own eyes in the mirror, searching for the man I used to be. The rational man. The man in control. A whisper slithered up from the drain. A gurgling, watery sound that vibrated through the porcelain. You stole $20 from Mom's purse in 4th grade. My blood froze. I stared at the drain, at the small dark hole where the water was swirling away. The voice had come from there, from inside the pipes. You told her you thought the cleaning lady took it, the whisper gurgled, triumphant. You let her fire Mrs. Rodriguez. You remember her, Jake? She had 2 little kids. You made her cry. My soul flew away. No, that secret was buried even deeper than the dog, a petty, shameful, childish crime. Forgotten. Walled off. How? How? This thing wasn't just a manifestation of one trauma. It was a librarian of my entire sordid history. It had access to every dark and dusty corner of my soul. I stumbled backward, away from the sink, my hand fumbling for the doorknob. I had to get out. But get out to where? Back to him? The bathroom, my tiny sanctuary, was now just as violated as the rest of the apartment. There was no safe place. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled rage, I threw the door open and stormed back into the living room. "What do you want from me?" I screamed, my voice cracking. Pip was no longer on the armrest. He was standing now in the middle of the room, right on the cheap beige rug, next to the spot where I'd found the toy car. He looked up at me, his head tilted. That awful, serene smile was still plastered on his face. "I just want to play, Jake. Just like old times. We used to have so much fun." "We never had fun," I shot back, my voice raw. "I was a lonely kid. You were a symptom. Something I invented because I had no friends." "Are you sure you invented me?" he whispered, and the question hung in the thick air, heavy and lethal. "Or did you just forget what I really was?" He took a step. No, not a step. He glided. A smooth, unnatural shift in space that made my stomach churn. He was closer now. "You think you're a good person, don't you? The put-upon architect. Drowning in work. Left by his wife. It's never your fault, is it?" "Shut up!" I snarled, my muscles tense. "The Braxton Project," he said, his voice dropping lower, more conspiratorial. "You know the load-bearing calculations for the West Wall are wrong. You saw it 3 days ago. But fixing it would mean admitting a mistake. It would mean a delay. So you said nothing. You're hoping the city inspector misses it." My throat was dry. He was right. It was a small miscalculation, probably within the safety margin, but it was there. A knot of ice formed in my gut. "Just a little lie," Pip whispered, his eyes glinting. "Like telling Sarah you had to work late when you were really at a bar because you couldn't stand the thought of going home to her. You remember that lie, Jake? The one that started it all?" "Get out!" I roared. My eyes scanned the room, landing on the stack of heavy books on my drafting table. Without a moment's hesitation, I grabbed the top one, a thick, hardbound volume on brutalist architecture. It was heavy, solid, real. "I'll kill you!" I screamed, a meaningless threat against something that wasn't alive. I hurled the book with all my strength. I aimed it right at his chest. I saw it fly, end over end, a vector of my rage and terror. It flew straight and true, and it passed right through him. There was no impact, no sound of it hitting flesh. Pip's form didn't even flicker. The book continued its trajectory and slammed into the wall behind him with a sickening crack. The plaster shattered. The book fell to the floor, its spine broken, pages splayed out like a dead bird's wing. Pip hadn't moved. He hadn't flinched. He simply stood there, in the same spot, watching me. The smile was gone. His face was a blank canvas of patient, ancient malice. The fight went out of me, replaced by a cold, hollowing dread. I stood rooted to the spot. It was real. It wasn't in my head, and I couldn't touch it. I couldn't hurt it. It was a ghost. A demon. What is this? What in God's name is in my apartment? My sanity, a structure I had painstakingly built over 38 years, crumbled into dust. All my logic, all my reason was useless debris. I was trapped. I was trapped in a small room, 7 stories up, with a thing that knew every bad thing I had ever done and could stand there while I threw a 10-pound book through its chest. My survival instinct, primal and stupid, took over. I needed a barrier. I needed a lock. I scrambled for the front door, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My fingers were slick with sweat as I fumbled with the chain. I slid it into its track. The sound was pathetic, a tiny metallic scrape against an immense, unknowable threat. I checked the deadbolt. It was already thrown. Locked. Secure. I leaned my forehead against the solid wood of the door, closing my eyes. I was panting, my lungs burning. The air is so thick that breathing is difficult. I listened. The rain, the wind howling, the distant muffled wail of a siren, and inside the apartment, silence. Maybe that was it. Maybe showing that I was truly terrified was what it wanted. Maybe it was gone. I held my breath, listening. 1 second. 2. 5. Nothing. Then I heard it. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't inside my head. It was a sound from the other side of the door, from the hallway. A child's laughter. It was a light, tinkling sound. A sound that should have been joyful, but it was hollow, mocking. It was Pip's laugh, and it was outside the locked, bolted, chained door. He was in the hall. He had passed through the walls as easily as he'd let the book pass through his body. The lock meant nothing. The walls meant nothing. I wasn't trapped in here with it. The entire world was the trap, and I was just in one of its rooms. The laughter stopped, and a new sound began. The dry, rhythmic hack of Mrs. Gable's cough starting up again from across the hall. And in the silence between her coughs, I heard the soft, chilling sound of a small boy humming a nursery rhyme I hadn't heard in 30 years. My forehead was pressed against the wood. The chain was on. The deadbolt was thrown. Useless. All of it was useless. The humming from the hallway seeped through the door, a thin, needle-like sound that pierced the barrier of the wood, the lock, the chain. It drilled directly into my brain. It was a tune I knew, a simple melody my mother used to hum while she worked in the garden. He had stolen that, too. He was out there, in the dim, stale-smelling hallway, and Mrs. Gable was across from him, coughing her life away, oblivious. Or maybe not. Maybe her coughing was a response, an answer. My head is spinning with a series of questions. What is this? A ghost? A memory with teeth? The humming stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was a waiting silence. My heart was pounding, a frantic, trapped thing beating against my ribs. I held my breath and listened. The storm was a distant rumble now. The city siren had faded. There was only the sound of my own blood in my ears and the dry, rasping cough from across the hall. Hack, hack, hack. A 3-beat rhythm of decay. I couldn't stay there, pressed against the door like a supplicant. My back pressed against the wall, and I slid along it, away from the entryway. My eyes scanned the room. The broken book on the floor, the dent in the plaster, the armchair where he had sat, its cushion looking undisturbed. He was gone from sight, but the whole room felt charged, polluted by his presence. The air is so thick that breathing is difficult. I needed water. My throat was dry, coated with the residue of cheap whiskey and fear. I moved toward the kitchenette, walking step by step, my feet heavy. Every shadow seemed to hold a shape. Every reflection in the dark windows seemed to move. He was there. He was sitting on the kitchen counter next to the sink, right beside the bottle of whiskey I'd dropped. His legs were crossed, one sneaker dangling in the air. He wasn't looking at me. He was examining his fingernails with an air of detached curiosity, as if he were simply a boy waiting for his mother to finish the dishes. My whole body froze. I stood rooted to the spot, halfway between the living room and the kitchen. He hadn't made a sound. He had just appeared there, a silent transfer from the hallway to my counter. How? What is this all about? I said nothing. What was there to say? My screams had done nothing. My rage had done nothing. I just watched him. He looked up from his hands, and his dark eyes met mine. The polite, awful smile returned. It was a mask, a thing he wore. He shifted his gaze to a tall, clean glass I'd left by the sink. He reached out a pale hand. His fingers didn't seem to have joints. They bent with a fluid, unnatural grace. He nudged the glass. It tipped, teetered on the edge of the counter for a long second, and then fell. The crash on the linoleum floor was explosive. A starburst of shattered glass shot out in all directions. I flinched, a reflexive jerk of my entire body, a whisper right next to my ear. Oops! I spun around. There was absolutely no one there. The space was empty. I looked back at the counter. Pip was still sitting in the exact same spot, his expression unchanged. He hadn't moved. He couldn't have. "You're so clumsy, Jake," the whisper continued, seeming to curl into my ear canal like smoke. I backed away, my foot crunching on a piece of broken glass. I needed to get away from him, from the whispers. I stumbled back to my drafting table. Work. I had to work. The Braxton Project. The calculations. The logic of steel and concrete. It was my only anchor in this swirling vortex of madness. I sank into my chair, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I grabbed a pencil, the wood a small, solid comfort in my palm. The blueprints were spread out, a sea of white lines on a blue background. Order. Reason. Clank. Hiss. The old air conditioning unit in the wall sputtered to life. It was a familiar sound, a death rattle I heard 100 times a night. A gust of cool, metallic-smelling air washed over me. It was a relief from the heat of the room. I closed my eyes for a biao second, trying to focus on the numbers, on the schematics. A new sound wove itself into the hiss of the vent. A whisper, faint at first. "Jakey!" My eyes shot open. My blood froze. That name. No one had called me that in 30 years. Not since my mom. It was her name for me when I was small, when I was sick, when she was tucking me in at night. A secret, gentle name from a life that no longer existed. It was a name I had buried. "Are you scared, Jakey?" The whisper from the vent continued, playful and cruel. "Don't be scared. We're going to play a game." I scrambled up from my chair, kicking it over. It clattered to the floor. "Stop it!" I breathed, the words barely audible. "Just stop." My eyes darted to the vent, a small metal grill in the wall. The sound was coming from there, from inside the building's metal guts. This is impossible. It's the wind. It's the pressure in the ducts. My brain is just turning noise into words. A logical, explainable, acoustic phenomenon. But I knew it wasn't. I turned back to the table, desperate to find my footing. My eyes fell on the half-full mug of coffee, cold now for hours. Without a moment's hesitation, I grabbed it. The caffeine. I needed it. I needed to be sharp, to fight this. As I raised the mug, a cold spot formed on my elbow. A pressure. A small, firm touch that wasn't there. My arm jerked. The mug tipped, and a torrent of dark brown liquid poured out. It cascaded over the Braxton blueprints. The coffee spread instantly, a tide of ruin, bleeding into the crisp paper, warping the precise lines, turning my careful work into a meaningless, ugly stain. I stared, stunned. The coffee dripped from the edge of the table onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip. Pip was standing on the other side of the table now. He hadn't walked there. He was just there. His hands were behind his back. He looked at the mess with a feigned expression of sympathy. "Another accident," he whispered, his voice full of mock sorrow. "You're making such a mess tonight." My muscles tensed up. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth ached. I wanted to lunge across the table, to tear him apart, but I knew it was useless. It was like fighting the air. He ignored me, his attention shifting to the small architectural model on the corner of the table. It was a scale replica of the Braxton Building lobby. I'd spent weeks on it. The tiny couches, the miniature reception desk, the little plastic figures of people frozen in motion. It was my creation, a world I controlled. Pip glided closer to it. He leaned over, his pale face illuminated by the glow of my drafting lamp. He looked like a giant peering into a dollhouse. "So many little people," he said, his voice a normal, conversational tone for the first time. It was more shocking than the whisper. "They all trust you, Jake. They trust your lines, your numbers. They believe the walls will hold." He reached a delicate finger into the model. He gently touched one of the qua, plastic figures, a woman in a business suit holding a tiny briefcase. "This one could be Sarah," he said softly. "Always leaving. Always disappointed in you." He moved his finger to another figure, a man standing alone by a pillar. "And this one, this is you. All by yourself, pretending you're strong." "Don't touch it!" I snarled. Pip's smile widened. It was a predator's smile. "But this is the game," he said. He hooked his finger under the plastic figure of the woman. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it flying. It bounced off the wall and disappeared under the desk. Then his gaze fell on a family of 4 figures I had placed near the model's entrance. A mother, a father, 2 small children. He picked up the father figure between his thumb and forefinger. He held it up to the light. "You told the Braxton developers you could do it under budget," he said, his voice returning to a conspiratorial whisper. "You cut corners on the steel reinforcements, just a little. No one would ever know. Just like Mrs. Rodriguez's job. Just a little lie to make your life easier." He brought his other hand up. He held the little plastic man by its head and its feet. "Stop," I said, my voice cracking. Snap. The sound was tiny, but it echoed in the room like a gunshot. He had broken the figure in half. He dropped the 2 pieces back into the model. He picked up the mother. Snap. The 2 children. Snap. Snap. He left the 4 broken bodies scattered across the pristine miniature lobby floor. He looked up at me, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Everything you build," he whispered, "you break." I couldn't move. I just stared at the carnage in my model, the little plastic torsos and legs. It was a desecration, a violation of the one place I thought I had control. My soul flew away. My mind went blank. The fight was gone. There was nothing left but a vast, hollow space inside me where my confidence used to be. I was a fraud, a liar, A clumsy, careless man who broke everything he touched. He wasn't telling me anything new. He was just holding up a mirror. I pushed away from the table. I needed to lie down. I needed the world to go black for a few hours. I stumbled away from the drafting table, away from the broken model and the stained blueprints. I headed for the short hallway that led to my bedroom, my feet shuffling, my head hanging low in defeat. I passed the bathroom first, and I stopped. The door was open. Just a crack. A sliver of darkness, about an inch wide. I stared at it. That's not right. I had slammed that door. I had heard the lock click. I was certain of it. I had leaned against it, felt the solid wood against my back. My heart skipped a beat. A new kind of cold, different from the fear, washed over me. It was a cold of profound wrongness. I slowly turned my head, looking down the hall. My bedroom door, also open. A perfect, identical 1-inch gap. The closet door at the end of the hall, the same. I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that I had closed them all earlier. I was meticulous about it. A stupid habit. Closed doors felt safer, more contained. He hadn't just broken my things. He hadn't just gotten inside my head. He was changing the space around me. He was opening the locks. He was moving the doors. He was rewriting the rules of my physical world. The locks meant nothing. The walls meant nothing. And now the closed doors meant nothing. There were no barriers left. There was no sanctuary. There was only the room, and the room next to it, and the room after that. All of them open to him. All of them his playground. My feet were bolted to the floor. I didn't move. I just stared. The bathroom door. The bedroom door. The closet door. 3 vertical slots of blackness, perfectly aligned, perfectly spaced. They were like wounds cut into the hallway, tombs left ajar. How can this be? I had closed them. I had locked them. I remembered the click of the bathroom lock, a small metallic sound of security. I had leaned my weight against it, my back pressed against the wall, the solid wood a temporary shield. It was a fact, a physical memory. But facts didn't matter anymore. The evidence was right in front of me. 3 gaping invitations. My eyes scanned the room, darting from the stained blueprints to the wreckage of the Braxton model, then back to the hallway. He hadn't just broken things. He was editing my reality. He was moving through walls, through locked doors, with the ease of a thought. I was in a cage, and he was both the zookeeper and a ghost who could slip between the bars at will. There was no defense, no barrier. The very geometry of the apartment was his to command. My muscles tensed up. A tremor started in my hands, a violent, uncontrollable shaking. My breath hitched. The air is so thick that breathing is difficult. I needed an anchor. I needed a voice from the outside world, a voice that wasn't a whisper from a vent or a memory, a voice that would tell me I was overtired, seeing things, hallucinating from stress and whiskey, a voice that would stitch my unraveling mind back together with the thread of simple, boring normalcy. Sarah. The name surfaced like a body dredged from a deep lake. My ex-wife. The last person on earth I should call. The last person I wanted to show this weakness to. Our last conversation had been about a late alimony check, her voice a flat line of tired disappointment. Calling her now, in this state, was an act of supreme self-destruction. But who else was there? My parents were gone. My friends had drifted away after the divorce. casualties of a war I had mostly fought with myself. There was no one. Just the coughing from Mrs. Gable's apartment and the small, pale boy who was methodically dismantling my life. I needed to hear her voice, her cynical, grounded, brutally unimpressed voice. She would laugh at me. She would tell me to get a grip. And for a few seconds, I could borrow her reality. I could pretend it was mine. My phone was on the edge of the drafting table, lying in a puddle of spilled coffee. Without a moment's hesitation, I lunged for it, my hand splashing into the cold, sticky liquid. I didn't care. I wiped it on my pants, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped it twice. The screen lit up, a brilliant, clean rectangle in the gloom. Her name was still in my favorites. A relic of a past I could no longer recognize. My thumb hovered over the call icon. I took a breath. My heart is pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could hear it. A frantic, wet thumping. I could hear the storm, a low growl in the distance. I could hear the hiss of the air conditioner. From across the hall, a new sound began. Hack, 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 hack. A change in Mrs. Gable's rhythm. I pressed the button. The phone began to ring. One ring, 2 rings, an eternity between each one. My eyes darted around the room. The counter was empty. The armchair was empty. Where was he? What is this all about? Knowing he was out of sight was worse than seeing him. It meant he could be anywhere. Behind me. Over me. What? Her voice was an ice pick in my ear. No hello. Just a flat, weary what? As if my call was the final burden of an already impossible day. Sarah, I said. My own voice sounded strange. Thin. Brittle. My throat is dry. Jake? Do you know what time it is? I glanced at the clock on the microwave. 11:47 p.m. I know. I'm sorry. I need to ask you something. A long, heavy sigh. If this is about the check, I told you. I'll have my lawyer. No, it's not about that, I cut in, my voice too loud, too desperate. It's not. Something's happening here. In my apartment. I could almost hear her roll her eyes. Did the plumbing explode again? Call the landlord, not me. No, I can't explain it. How could I? How could I say the words? My imaginary friend from when I was 8 is here, and he's breaking my things. I would be committed. She would be the first one to sign the papers. I could see the satisfaction on her face. I always knew he was unstable. I'm seeing things, I stammered, landing on the most plausible lie. I think the stress is getting to me. I'm not right. A brief silence. For a second, a stupid, hopeless part of me thought I heard a flicker of concern. What kind of things? Her tone was clinical, like a doctor asking about a rash. I don't know. Shadows, noises, I said, my gaze fixed on the dark hallway. And things are moving on their own. My back was to the living room window. In the reflection on the dark screen of my phone, I saw him. Pip. He was standing directly behind me, not 5 feet away. My whole body froze. He was perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted as if he were listening intently to the call. He wasn't breathing. He wasn't moving. He was just a statue carved from nightmare. Jake, you're not making any sense, Sarah said. The irritation was back. You're working too hard. You're drinking too much. You've done this before. You get overwhelmed. and you spin out. No, this is different, I whispered, my eyes locked on the reflection. Pip's reflection raised a single finger to its lips. Shh! How is it different? She shot back. How is this different from when you thought the neighbors were spying on you? Or when you were convinced your boss was trying to poison your coffee? It's the same pattern. He knew. He knew she would say this. He was watching me fall into a trap he had laid. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to banish the reflection. But I could feel him there, a cold spot in the air behind me. It just is, I pleaded. My voice was cracking. Please, Sarah. Just talk to me for a minute. Just tell me something normal. I was begging. I hated the sound of my own voice. Weak. Pathetic. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I heard the distant wail of a siren through her phone, a sound from a different city, a different world, a world where things made sense. Then she spoke, and the words she chose were not her own. They were his. They had to be. He had put them in her mouth from across town. You sound just like you did back then, Jake. My breath caught in my throat. My mind went blank. All wound up over nothing, she continued, oblivious. Panicking in your room. Crying because you saw a monster in the closet. You're a grown man. There are no monsters. There's just bills and deadlines and disappointment. Grow up. Back then. The two words echoed in the cavern of my skull. Back then. The time when I was 8. The time when I would cry to my mother about the boy in the corner of my room, the boy no one else could see, the boy who told me to do bad things, the boy she and my father had forced me to abandon. Pip. My eyes snapped open. I looked at the phone's dark screen. The reflection of the boy behind me was smiling now. It wasn't the polite, awful smile from before. This was a real one, a smile of pure, unadulterated victory. It reached his dark, ancient eyes. He had won. She had just handed him the crown. She had confirmed his existence. She had told me, in her own dismissive way, that this was not new. This was a relapse. This was a continuation. This was real. Jake? Are you even listening to me? Sarah's voice was a sharp, distant annoyance. I couldn't speak. I was frozen in place. He had severed my last line to the sane world by making the sane world confirm my insanity. It was a perfect, elegant checkmate. He took a step forward in the reflection. My skin crawled. I have to go, I managed to choke out. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with finality. Call a therapist, Jake. Don't call me. Click. She was gone. The line was dead. The silence in the apartment rushed in to fill the void, and it was heavier than before. It was a silence full of him. I lowered the phone, my arm feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I turned around slowly, my heart a leaden drum in my chest. The space behind me was empty. There was absolutely no one there. Of course. I stumbled forward, my legs unsteady. I let the phone slip from my numb fingers. It clattered onto the floor, next to a shard of broken glass. My vision swam. All the fight, all the adrenaline, all the panic drained out of me at once, leaving behind a profound exhaustion, a hollow ache. I was utterly, completely alone. Trapped in this hot, dust-choked box with a thing that knew my oldest fears because he had created them. My eyes fell on my desk. Amidst the chaos of the ruined blueprints and the broken model, there was a small silver frame. It was a picture of me and Sarah, taken years ago on a trip to the coast. We were younger. We were smiling. Her arm was around my shoulder. It was a snapshot from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. It was the only personal item on the entire desk. A foolish, sentimental anchor. I reached for it. I needed to see her face. The real face. Not the memory of the voice on the phone. I picked up the frame. The glass was cool against my fingertips. Something was wrong here. I brought it closer. The light from the drafting lamp glinted off the surface. It wasn't a smooth, uniform reflection. It was fractured, jagged. My blood froze. I held it directly under the light. Her face. Her smiling, happy face. It was gone. In its place was a web of violent, intersecting scratches. Someone had taken something sharp, a pin, a knife, a shard of glass, and had systematically obliterated her image. They had dug deep into the photographic paper, gouging and shredding her eyes, her mouth, her hair, until all that was left was a starburst of white, fibrous pulp. A wound on the paper. My face, smiling dumbly next to the carnage, was untouched. I stared, stunned. The scratches were fresh. I could see the tiny curled edges of the paper where the tool had dug in. This wasn't old damage. This had happened tonight, while I was cowering by the door, while I was staring at the broken glass, while I was on the phone begging her for help. He had been here, at my desk. He had picked up my last memory of happiness, and he had mutilated it. He hadn't just vandalized a photograph. He had erased her. He had shown me, in the clearest possible terms, what he does to the people I care about. He isolates, and then he destroys. A single dry sob escaped my lips. It was a pathetic animal sound. I placed the frame back on the desk with a shaking hand. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I leaned over, my hands on my knees, convinced I was going to be sick. From the hallway, a soft sound drifted. A quiet, mocking laugh. It was the sound of a child who had just won game. The laughter was gone. The air settled, heavy and still. My knees were weak. I was leaning on the drafting table, my knuckles white, my gaze fixed on the violated photograph. The mangled paper where Sarah's face used to be was like an open sore. He hadn't just scratched it. He had excavated it. He had dug her out of my life with a sharp point, leaving a void. A wave of sickness washed over me. I turned away, stumbling toward the kitchen sink, my stomach churning. I gripped the cold porcelain edge. My reflection in the grimy window above it was a pale, distorted mask. A stranger. I looked wrecked. Beaten. What the hell is going on? This wasn't just a haunting. This was a siege. A methodical, psychological demolition. He wasn't just trying to scare me. He was trying to unmake me. To strip away every connection, every memory, every last handhold on the person I thought I was. My eyes flickered up to the ceiling. The single bare bulb in the kitchen fixture buzzed and stuttered. Flicker. Off. Flicker. On. It had been doing that since I got home. A minor annoyance. An old building problem. But now, in this new context, it felt like a nerve twitching. A symptom of the building's sickness. Of my sickness. I needed to do something normal. Something logical. Something a sane person would do. A sane person would call the landlord about a faulty light. They wouldn't be staring at pictures and hearing ghosts. They would address a practical problem. Action. I needed action. A small, controllable task to prove I was still in charge of something, anything at all. I pushed myself off the sink. My phone was still on the floor where I'd dropped it. The screen was dark. I bent down, my joints protesting, and picked it up. It felt alien in my hand, a gateway to madness. I had called Sarah, and he had used her voice to gut me. Who would he use this time? The landlord? Mr. Henderson? A faceless name who cashed my checks. There was no emotion there to exploit. Just a business transaction. Safe. I found his number in my contacts and pressed call. My back pressed against the wall, my eyes scanning the room, the dark hallway, the deeper shadows in the corners. The phone rang. Once. Twice. The sound was unnervingly loud in the tense air. Then a click. Not a voice. A recording. "You've reached the office of Henderson Properties." The voice was tinny, professional, devoid of any life. It was a perfect, sterile wall of sound. "Our office is currently closed. Please leave a detailed message with your name and apartment number, and I'll get back to you during business hours." A simple, mundane voicemail. I felt a sliver of relief. It was real. It was normal. "Hi, Mr. Henderson," I began, my voice unsteady. "This is Jake Miller in 7B. The light in my kitchen is flickering badly. I think the fixture might need—" I stopped. Did I hear something? Underneath the landlord's recorded voice, another sound. A whisper. Faint. Like static. My mind went blank. I must be imagining it. Stress. The storm. I took a breath. I had to be sure. I hung up and immediately called back. The phone rang. The click. The recording started again. I held the phone to my ear so tightly it hurt. I held my breath and listened. "You've reached the office of Henderson Properties." There it was, underneath the bland baritone. A high, thin whisper, like the hiss of escaping gas. It moved in the gaps between the recorded words. It was Pip. "Our office is currently closed. He's not here to help you. Please leave a detailed message. We know you're alone. With your name and apartment number. In the dark. And I'll get back to you. Never. During business hours." My blood froze. I snatched the phone away from my ear as if it were red hot. I stared at it, horrified. This is impossible. It was a recording, a digital file on a server somewhere. It couldn't be altered. It couldn't be possessed. But I had heard it. Twice. Clear as a bell. The words had been threaded through the original message with surgical precision, a parasitic voice clinging to a host. He could infect technology. He could twist the outside world to fit the shape of my nightmare. There was no escape, no safe harbor. Every line I cast out for help, he would grab and use to pull me under. A tremor started in my hand and traveled up my arm. My whole body shakes uncontrollably. I let the phone slip from my fingers. It hit the linoleum with a dead plastic smack. I didn't care. I backed away from it, a useless talisman, now corrupted. My chest was tight. The air is so thick that breathing is difficult. I needed space. I stumbled out of the kitchen and into the living room, my gaze wild. The room was a disaster zone. Broken models, spilled coffee, scratched photos. The physical evidence of my sanity's collapse. My eyes landed on the television set against the far wall. It was an old, bulky thing, a relic from a decade ago. It was off. The screen was a black, glossy rectangle, a dark mirror. As I stood there panting, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, and for a split second, I saw my reflection. A gaunt, haunted man standing in the ruins of his own life. The thunder that followed was a low, guttural growl that shook the window panes. The The darkness rushed back in, but the image on the screen didn't entirely disappear. Something remained. I moved cautiously, trying not to make a sound. Step by step, I approached the television, my heart pounding in my chest. The reflection was faint, a ghostly outline in the gloom. It was me. But I wasn't alone. Standing next to my reflection was a boy. A small boy, maybe 8 years old. He had my dark hair, my chin. He was wearing a faded blue t-shirt with a rocket ship on it. I remembered that shirt. I had loved that shirt. This wasn't Pip. Pip was pale and wore a red baseball tee. This boy was me. My younger self. A specter from my own past, summoned into the dark glass. I stood rooted to the spot. Time seemed to stop. Young Jake wasn't looking at me. His head was turned slightly, and he was staring up at my reflection, at the 38-year-old man I had become. And his face was a mask of pure terror. His eyes were wide, filled with a desperate, frantic fear I hadn't felt since I was a child hiding under the covers. He looked at me with an expression of profound pity and horror, as if he were seeing a monster. Then, his small mouth began to move. There was no sound, just the slow, deliberate shaping of a single word. His lips formed the shape of the sound. R-U-N, run. A silent scream from my own past. A warning from the part of me that still remembered what this thing was, what it was capable of. Before the shame, before the denial, before the forced forgetting. He remembered, and he was terrified for me. My throat is dry. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I was watching my own innocence beg me to flee a prison of my own making. He knew. He knew what Pip wanted. He knew what came next. As I stared, frozen in place, the image flickered. The boy's terrified face dissolved. The reflection of my own adult face warped, twisted for a moment, and then vanished. The screen was just a black, empty void again. I was alone in the room, but I wasn't. The warning lingered in the air. Run! A guttural sound tore from my throat, half sob, half scream. I lunged forward. Reflexively, I grabbed the thick power cord snaking from the back of the TV. My fingers closed around it, and I yanked. I pulled with all my strength, a savage, primal need to disconnect, to sever, to make it stop. The plug ripped from the wall socket with a loud, violent crack. The television, heavy as it was, rocked on its stand. For a second, I thought it would topple. It settled back into place with a dull thud. Silence. The screen was dead. Truly dead this time. No power. No reflections. No ghosts. Just a piece of black plastic and glass. I stood there, heaving, my chest burning, my hand still clutched the useless power cord, my knuckles were scraped raw from the wall. I didn't feel it. All I could feel was the echo of that silent word. Run. But where? How? I am on the 7th floor of a locked building in the middle of a storm. Running was not an option. There was nowhere to go. The front door was a gateway to nothing. The windows opened onto a 100-foot drop. The phone was a weapon used against me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, a cold dread that was deeper than anything I had felt yet. Pip wasn't the monster, not the real one. He was a symptom, a key. He was the thing that had come back to unlock the door to a room I had sealed shut 30 years ago. A room inside my own head. The whispers in the vents, the secrets he knew, the face in the television. They weren't just from him. They were from me. He hadn't just returned. He had brought my past with him. I wasn't being haunted by an imaginary friend. I was being haunted by Jake Miller, the boy who saw monsters, the boy who lied, the boy who knew what happened in Boston. I dropped the cord. It coiled on the floor like a dead snake. I backed away from the dead television until my back hit the opposite wall. I slid down to the floor, my legs giving out. I sat there in the dark, my arms wrapped around my knees, a grown man huddled like a terrified child. The storm raged outside, but it was nothing compared to the one that had just broken inside me. The coughing from Mrs. Gable's apartment started again, a dry, rhythmic, insistent sound. And for the first time, I heard it for what it was. A countdown. The wall was breathing. No, not the wall. The sound was coming through the wall. Hack, 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 hack. Mrs. Gable's cough. It had been a background texture to my life in this building for 3 years, like the groan of the elevator or the hiss of the radiators. An annoyance. Now it was a sound with teeth, a metronome for my unraveling. Each dry, rasping burst was a grain of sand falling in an hourglass I couldn't see. I was still on the floor, my back against the wall, knees pulled to my chest. A 38-year-old man in the fetal position. Pathetic. The image of my younger self, his face a mask of terror, his silent plea, "Run," was burned onto the back of my eyelids. He knew. The boy I used to be knew what this was. He knew the rules of the game I had forgotten how to play. I wasn't being haunted by some external force. I was being reunited with a piece of myself, the piece that I had cut out and buried in the dark soil of my memory. Hack, hack, hack. Something touched my shoulder. I flinched, a violent, full-body jerk. My head whipped around. There was absolutely no one. Just the grimy, water-stained wallpaper of my living room. I scanned the room, my eyes darting into the deep shadows pooling in the corners. Nothing. The air was thick and still. I must have imagined it. A nerve ending firing off in a body shot through with adrenaline. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, my muscles trembling. My gaze drifted back to the dead television screen. It was just a black box now, an inert piece of furniture. But the warning still hung in the air, a cold spot in the room. Hack. A tap on my shoulder. It wasn't a phantom sensation this time. It was definite. A single, distinct pressure from a small point, like a finger. I didn't move. I couldn't. My whole body froze. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I held my breath and listened. The storm outside lashed rain against the window pane. The building groaned. Hack, hack. Tap, tap. It was in sync. My blood froze. Every shallow, rattling cough from the other side of the wall was being answered by a cold, precise tap on my right shoulder. A perfect, mocking rhythm. A duet. I couldn't see it. I didn't need to. I knew whose finger it was. He was here, right behind me. His presence was a drop in temperature, a weight in the air. Hack. Tap. My throat was dry. A shiver ran down my spine. I squeezed my eyes shut, as if not seeing would make it stop. It didn't. The tapping continued, a relentless, playful torment. Cough. Tap. Cough. Tap. Then came the whisper. It wasn't in the air. It wasn't behind me. It was inside my head, a high, clear thought that was not my own. She's doing it on purpose, Jake. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it was useless. The voice was already past the gates. She knows you can hear her. She lies there in her bed, listening to you fall apart. It's funny to her. A little cough for the man who lost everything. A little chuckle for the man who is all alone. No, I whispered, my voice cracking. She's a sick old woman. Hack, hack, hack. Tap, tap, tap. The taps were harder now, more insistent. Is she? Or does she just like the sound? The sound of you clenching your teeth. The sound of your heart beating faster. She's mocking you. Poke. 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 Laughing at you. The logic was insane. It was the C4 of all reasoning, designed to blow apart the foundations of my sanity. And God help me, it was working. The rhythmic sound from next door was no longer a symptom of illness. It was a weapon, an act of aggression. I felt a surge of hot, black anger, an irrational rage that was so potent it made me dizzy. Make her stop, Jake. The whisper was smooth now, seductive, a promise of relief. You could. It would be so easy. Just a little noise, a little scare. Make her stop. Make her stop. Make her stop. I scrambled to my feet, lurching away from the wall, from the tapping, from the voice. I stumbled into the center of the room, my chest heaving. The air was so thick that breathing was difficult. Get out of my head! I screamed at the empty space around me. My own voice sounded alien and shrill. The only answer was the relentless drumming of the rain and the steady, maddening hack-hack from Mrs. Gable's apartment. I needed a drink. I needed to pour whiskey down my throat until the voice was drowned and the shaking stopped. I turned and rushed straight towards the kitchen, my movements clumsy, uncoordinated. I slammed a palm against the light switch. The bare bulb overhead flickered to life, buzzing erratically, casting jumpy shadows across the peeling linoleum. I grabbed a glass from the dish rack, my hand shaking so badly that it rattled against the rim. I reached for the bottle of cheap whiskey on the counter next to the knife block. My hand stopped midair. Something was wrong here. I stared at the block of wood. 5 slots. 4 knives. The largest slot, the one that held the big chef's knife, was vacant. My mind went blank. I always put the knives back. Always. It was a habit ingrained from a childhood of my mother's warnings. You use it, you wash it, you put it away. I hadn't used it. I hadn't cooked a real meal in weeks. I'd been living on takeout and stale coffee. So, who? A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. The question was a stupid one. I knew who. He was showing me. He was showing me what he could do. He wasn't just a voice and a reflection. He was real enough to move things, real enough to take things. My eyes scanned the small kitchen, the counter, the floor, the sink. It wasn't there. Where did he put it? What is this all about? Is this a joke? A new whisper coiled in my mind, playful and light. I left you a present, Jake. Go look. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But my legs were moving, carrying me out of the kitchen, back through the wrecked living room. My dread was a physical thing, a lead weight in my gut. I knew where he meant. There was only one place left that he hadn't completely violated, one place that was supposed to be mine. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom. The wind howled outside, and a draft snaked in from the window, making the vertical blinds sway and click together. The room was dark, save for the weak, ambient light filtering in from the living room. My bed was unmade, the sheets a tangled mess. And there, Resting in the center of my pillow was the knife. I stood rooted to the spot. It was laid out perfectly, the long, 8-inch blade gleaming even in the dim light. It was positioned with an almost surgical precision, the sharp tip pointing directly at the indentation where my head was supposed to be. It was an invitation, a threat, a statement of intent. "This is impossible." "Do you like it?" Pip's voice was right beside my ear now, intimate and proud. "I call him Mr. Sharp. He wants to be friends." My muscles tensed up. Mr. Sharp. He'd given it a name. He'd turned a piece of kitchen cutlery into a character in this nightmare, an accomplice. I couldn't believe my eyes. I stared at the cold length of steel on my pillow. It wasn't just a knife anymore. It was a suggestion, a solution, a final answer to a persistent coughing problem. A guttural sound of revulsion tore out of my throat. This was it. This was the line. A ghost boy whispering about old secrets was one thing. A phantom knife laid on my pillow was another thing entirely. This was a direct incitement to violence, a tangible step towards an act I could never undo. Reflexively, I lunged forward. I didn't think. I reacted. My hand shot out and grabbed the knife. Not by the smooth wooden handle. My fingers closed around the cold, flat side of the blade itself. It was a stupid, dangerous move, but I didn't care. I just needed it off my bed. I needed it out of my room. I turned and ran, the knife clutched in my fist. Back through the living room, a wild man on a desperate mission. I didn't stop until I was back in the kitchen, standing over the sink. Without a moment's hesitation, I threw it. The knife hit the stainless steel basin with a deafening, violent clatter. It skidded, spun, and came to rest with its point aimed down the drain. The sound was ugly and final. I had rejected his gift. I had refused his friend. I leaned over the sink, my palms braced on the counter, panting. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at my hand. A thin, red line was welling up on my index finger where I had gripped the blade's edge. A small price. I was still in control. I could still say no. I felt a flash of triumph. It was a small victory, but it was mine. I had stared into the abyss, and I had thrown its offering into the garbage disposal. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, listening to the sound of my own ragged breath. The coughing from next door had stopped. Maybe Mrs. Gable had finally gone to sleep. For the first time in hours, there was a break in the psychological assault. I turned from the sink, my body still trembling but my resolve hardening. I would board up the window. I would stuff towels under the door. I would sit in the middle of the floor until morning. I would survive this. And then I saw it. On the floor. My floor had been clean. I was obsessive about it. One of the few things I could control. But it wasn't clean anymore. Near the window, where the rain was beating against the glass, was a footprint. It was small, the size of a child's foot, and it was starkly, terribly clear against the pale wood of the floor. It wasn't just an impression. It was made of something dark, wet, and clumpy. Mud. Fresh mud. I stood stunned. My mind tried to work, to find a logical path. How can this be? The window was closed and locked. I was on the 7th floor. There was no fire escape on this side of the building. This is an utter absurdity. As I stared, frozen in place, a second footprint appeared. It materialized out of thin air, about a foot in front of the first one. One moment there was nothing but wood grain. The next there was the perfect, muddy outline of a small, bare foot. There was no sound. No person. just the silent, impossible arrival of the print. My soul flew away. My breath caught in my throat. Then a third appeared, and a fourth. One by one, a trail of small, muddy footprints was being laid down on my clean floor. They were making a path, a straight, deliberate line leading from the storm-lashed window across my living room rug, heading directly for the open door of my bedroom, heading directly for my bed. Something had come in. While I was in the kitchen, dealing with the knife, something had slipped in through a locked window 7 stories up. The storm wasn't just outside anymore. He had brought it inside with him. The footprints kept appearing. Step by silent step. Marching toward my room. And I understood. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a memory. This was an invasion. And the battle for my apartment, for my mind, had just been lost. The trail stopped at my bedroom door, a series of small, muddy tracks on the wood floor I had painstakingly polished just last weekend. They were a declaration, a line drawn. He hadn't just gotten inside the apartment. He had gotten inside my control, inside the last bastion of order in my life. I stood frozen in place, a statue of a man who had seen a law of physics snap in half. The window was locked. 7th floor. There was no fire escape. It was an utter absurdity. My mind went blank. The frantic search for a logical explanation, a leak, a prank, a hallucination, died before it could even begin. There was no logic here. There was only the mud and the silence. The storm outside seemed to have paused, holding its breath to watch. The whisper came again, a sliver of ice in my brain. It was no longer mocking or playful. It was calm, matter of fact. You always tracked mud in. Mom hated it. She'd make you take your shoes off on the porch. I flinched. The memory was so sharp it was like a physical blow. Me, 8 years old, sneakers caked in the thick red Georgia clay, standing on the welcome mat while my mother stood in the doorway, hands on her hips, with that look of loving exasperation. A memory I hadn't accessed in 30 years. He plucked it from my head like a librarian pulling a book from a dusty shelf. You never listened, though. Not really. The voice was closer now, not in my head, but in the room. I turned slowly, my muscles screaming in protest. He was sitting on the edge of my unmade bed, right where the footprints ended. He wasn't wet. His faded red baseball shirt was dry, his jeans unstained. He looked as static and clean as a photograph. But his bare feet, dangling just above the floor, were caked in the same dark, wet mud that now patterned my apartment. He swung them back and forth, a lazy, childish motion that was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. He was a contradiction made solid, impossible, real. How? My throat was dry. The word came out as a useless croak. Pip's smile was a thin, bloodless line. It didn't touch his eyes. Those eyes were ancient, holding a darkness that didn't belong in the face of a child. How what, Jake? How did I get in? How do I know about Mom's porch? He tilted his head. You know how. We know everything together. I stumbled back a step, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a cry. My back hit the door frame of the living room. I was trapped between the path he had made and the architect of it. We know all the secrets, he whispered, his voice seeping into me. Even the little ones. The ones you think you forgot because they were so small. But they're not small, are they? They're the first bricks you used to build this room. He gestured around my disaster of an apartment. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied. The words tasted like ash. Pip's smile widened a fraction. 4th grade. After school. Mom's purse was on the kitchen counter. She was in the garden. You needed money for the new Star Speeder comic. His voice was a gentle lullaby of damnation. You told yourself you'd, pay it back. You just wanted to look at it. But your fingers were so fast, weren't they? A blue $20 bill. You folded it up so small, so small, and tucked it into your sock. My blood froze. I could feel it. The crispness of the bill, the clammy sweat in my sock, the burning, consuming guilt that made the comic book feel like it was made of acid in my hands. A secret I had carried like a tiny hot coal in my soul for 3 decades. A private, foundational shame. No, I gasped, shaking my head. That's not... I don't remember that. Liar, the word wasn't spoken. It was felt. A sudden drop in the room's temperature, Pip stopped swinging his feet. He just sat there, staring at me. You remember. You cried in your bed that night. You promised God you'd be good forever if he just didn't let you get caught. And you weren't caught. She never even noticed. Which was worse, wasn't it? I slid down the door frame, my legs giving out. I landed hard on the floor, the impact jolting up my spine. The air was so thick that breathing was difficult. He was stripping me down to the bone, layer by miserable layer. This wasn't a haunting. This was an audit. A spiritual inventory conducted by a demon in a baseball shirt. That was just a brick, Pip continued, his voice regaining its soft, conspiratorial tone. You got better at building. You laid bigger bricks. Heavier ones? He hopped off the bed. He didn't make a sound as his muddy feet touched the floor. He began to walk towards me, a slow, deliberate pace. He wasn't leaving new footprints. He was stepping perfectly into the ones that were already there, a phantom retracing his own impossible path. I tried to crawl backward, scrambling away like an insect, but my back was already against the wall. There was nowhere to go. He stopped just a few feet from me, looking down. His shadow fell over me, a cold weight. I know what you told Sarah. My heart stopped. It just ceased to beat for a full second. Of all the secrets, all the failures, all the lies, that was the one. The keystone. The lie that had brought the whole structure of my life crashing down. A lie so specific, so private, I had convinced myself it existed only in the past tense. A ghost that couldn't touch me anymore. Don't, I begged. My voice was a pathetic whimper. I was a 38-year-old man begging a memory to leave him alone. You were on the phone. In your car, parked 2 blocks away from the office, Pip recited, his voice a perfect, passionless echo of the moment. She was crying. She knew something was wrong. She asked you. She begged you for the truth. And you looked at your own reflection in the blank GPS screen, and you said it. His voice dropped, mimicking my own desperate baritone from that night. I was working late, Sarah. It was for the Henderson project, I swear. The words hung in the air between us, vibrating with the power of a wrecking ball. He knew. He knew the exact words. The lie wasn't just that I was working late. The lie was the Henderson project, a detail so mundane, so believable, it had been the sharpest part of the knife. I hadn't been working. I had been with someone else. A stupid, meaningless decision that had cost me everything. The one person I ever truly loved. A wave of nausea washed over me. I felt like I was going to be sick. He had been there. In the car. in my head. He had heard the lie as I crafted it, had watched as I used it to poison my own life. All my shame, my regret, my self-loathing, it was all swirling in the room, a visible storm he was conducting. "She believed you." "For a little while," Pip said, his face inches from mine now. "But the lie was a sickness. It got inside. And it rotted everything. You didn't just lie to her, Jake. You made her doubt her own mind. That was the part you really enjoyed." "That's not true!" I screamed, my voice tearing. I squeezed my eyes shut, a useless defense. "Yes, it is." I scrambled to my feet, pushing past him, a wild animal desperate for escape. I fled into the bathroom, the only room with a lock, and slammed the door shut, fumbling with the cheap brass knob until the bolt clicked home. I leaned my full weight against the door, my chest heaving. My heart was pounding, a frantic trapped bird against my ribs. I stared at my own reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror. A stranger looked back. A pale, haggard man with wild eyes and a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. This is not me. This is not happening. Stress. It had to be stress. A breakdown. A psychotic episode. "Look at you," Pip's voice whispered, coming from right behind me inside the locked room. My head whipped around. There was absolutely no one. Just the small, tiled space. The shower curtain with its mildewed hem. The toilet. The sink. In the mirror, Jake. "Look at yourself." I didn't want to, but my head turned, drawn by an invisible string. I met my own eyes again. "You're a bad person," the voice commanded, calm and steady. "You steal from your mother. You lie to your wife. You let your whole life rot from the inside out, and you blame your job. You blame the city. You blame everyone but the man in the mirror." "No!" I choked out, my hands gripping the edges of the sink until my knuckles were white. "Say it, Jake. Say it out loud. You need to." A flash. Not a memory, but an assault. My father's face, not as I remembered it. Stern, but fair, but twisted into a grotesque, cruel sneer. He was standing over me in my childhood bedroom. The room was dark. I was pointing at the closet, trying to tell him about Pip. His face got closer, his breath hot and smelling of stale beer. His voice boomed, distorted, echoing in the small bathroom. "Imaginary friends are for babies. Grow up. Are you a baby, Jacob? Are you a weak, sniveling baby?" The two voices, my father's from the past and Pip's from the present, merged into a single, overwhelming chorus inside my skull. A symphony of my own failure. "Say it." "My." Reflection stared back at me, its lips trembling, and then I heard my own voice, hollow and broken, fill the small room. "I'm a bad person." "Good." The whisper was triumphant. Again. "I'm a bad person." Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and shameful. "And?" My reflection's mouth opened. The words came out, torn from the deepest, most hidden part of me. "I deserve this." As soon as I said it, the pressure vanished. The voices went silent. The memory faded. I was left alone in the bathroom, staring at my own wrecked face. The sound of my own sobbing filling the silence. I had confessed. I had passed judgment on myself. I had finally agreed with him. I stayed there for what felt like an hour, my body trembling. Eventually, the sobs subsided into ragged breaths. The lock on the door felt pointless now. The monster wasn't on the other side. It was in here with me. It was me. Slowly, shakily, I reached out and unlocked the door. I had to face it. Whatever came next, I had to face it. I pulled the door open and stepped back into the hallway. The apartment was still. The rain had softened to a drizzle against the window. The muddy footprints were still there, a permanent stain on my home. And Pip was standing in the center of the living room, waiting for me. In his hand, he held the chef's knife. He hadn't been in the sink where I'd thrown it. He must have taken it again while I was having my collapse. He held it casually, the way a child might hold a favorite toy. He called him Mr. Sharp. He looked at me, his ancient eyes holding a kind of pity that was worse than any hatred. He saw the broken man who had emerged from the bathroom. He saw the surrender in my posture. He walked towards me. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there, waiting for the inevitable. He didn't raise the knife to strike. He didn't make a threatening gesture. He did something far worse. He reached up, his small, pale hand unnervingly steady, and gently laid the flat of the 8-inch blade against my cheek. The metal was cold, a shocking, intimate cold that seemed to suck all the heat from my skin. It didn't cut. It just rested there, a solid line of steel against my face. It was a promise. It was a question. It was a final, chilling statement of ownership. See? The whisper coiled inside my ear, soft and possessive. We're going to be great friends now, Jake. Just like old times. The cold did not leave when he pulled the knife away. It stayed on my cheek, a phantom burn, a brand of ice. I stood rooted to the spot. My muscles were stone. I watched him, this small figure in the gloom of my living room, and my mind was a flat gray sea. He had taken everything, my history, my shame, my self-loathing. He had held it all in his hands, and now he was holding a chef's knife. He owned me. He turned from me, a motion that was too smooth, too silent. He didn't walk so much as drift towards the large, cheap bookshelf against the far wall, the one I never dusted. The knife hung loosely at his side. He wasn't threatening me with it anymore. It was just a part of him now, an extension of his hand. I could hear my own heart, a frantic drum against my ribs. A drop of sweat traced a path down my temple. It felt like a tear. Pip stopped in front of the bookshelf. For a long moment he did nothing. He just stared at the film of grime and dust that coated the dark-stained particle board. The storm outside had found its voice again, the wind moaning around the corners of the building. Through the thin walls, I heard it. The dry, rhythmic cough from Mrs. Gable's apartment. A counterpoint to the storm. A death rattle keeping time. Then he raised his free hand. Slowly. Deliberately. He extended a single slender finger and pressed it to the dusty surface of the top shelf, right at my eye level. I could hear the faint, gritty scrape of his fingertip through the silence in the room. He began to draw. A straight line down. An eye. He moved his finger, the sound a horrible, intimate scratching. A K, an N, an O, a W. My blood froze. I knew what he was doing. I knew before the word was even finished. The a priori knowledge was a terror all its own. This is impossible. This is not happening. He finished the first line. I know. He moved to the line below it. He drew with the same unhurried precision. A-B-O-U-T. I swallowed, my throat dry and tight. It felt like swallowing sand. He was spelling out my damnation. Then came the final word, the kill shot. the one word that held the power to vaporize the miserable life I'd constructed. B-O-S-T-O-N. The letters stared out from the dust, stark and undeniable. A sentence passed. A life destroyed. I made a sound. A choked animal noise that was torn from my lungs. My legs buckled. I didn't fall, but I staggered sideways, my hand flying out to catch myself on the wall. The texture of the plaster was the only real thing in the universe. My mind went blank. Gone was the architect. Gone was the ex-husband. Gone was the man drowning in deadlines. All that was left was the cowering, terrified secret keeper. How? The question was a silent scream in my head. How can this be? No one knew about Boston. Not Sarah. Not my parents. Not a single living soul on this earth. It wasn't a memory I'd buried. It was a memory I had surgically excised, cauterized, and thrown into a locked vault in the deepest, blackest cellar of my mind. It was the foundation of every bad thing I was. It was the original sin that made the stolen $20, the lie to my wife, every other failure feel like childish misdeeds. It was my own personal, unforgivable abyss. And he knew. This thing, this boy, this nightmare in a red shirt, he knew it. He hadn't just plucked a memory. He had reached into the vault, bypassed the lock, and pulled out the one thing that proved I wasn't just a bad person. I was a monster. Pip turned his head slowly, looking at me over his shoulder. His face was devoid of expression. There was no triumph, no malice. Just a placid, terrifying certainty. He had played his last card, and he knew, with the ancient wisdom in his dark eyes, that it was the only one that mattered. The game was over. He had won. "Please," I whispered. The word had no sound. It was just a movement of my lips. My entire body was shaking, a tremor that started in my bones. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He understood my plea, and he ignored it completely. He turned away from the bookshelf and drifted towards the small galley kitchen. I listened to his bare feet making no sound on the worn linoleum. My eyes were still fixed on the words. "I know about Boston." They seemed to glow in the dim light. I heard a soft clink, then another, and another. The sound of the plastic alphabet magnets on my refrigerator door. The ones I'd bought on a whim, thinking I might leave myself cheerful notes. A relic of an optimism that now seemed like a cruel joke. I pushed myself off the wall. My legs felt like they were filled with water. Walking step by step, I moved cautiously, peering around the doorframe into the kitchen. He was standing in front of the refrigerator, his back to me. His small hand darted back and forth, moving the brightly colored letters. He was arranging them, building something. The soft click-clack of the magnets was the only sound besides the storm and my own ragged breathing. He stepped aside. There, on the white enamel of the refrigerator door, spelled out in a chaotic jumble of red, blue, green, and yellow letters, was a new message. 4B. Stops now. I stared at it. 4B. The man downstairs. The musician, or whatever he was, who played his bass at all hours. The man I'd gotten into 3 shouting matches with in the hallway. The man I fantasized about hurting during my darkest, most stress-fueled nights. A fantasy I thought was private. A rage I thought was contained. Pip was looking at me, his head tilted. He pointed a finger at the message on the fridge. Then he pointed down, at the floor. A gesture of simple cause and effect. A problem and a solution. He was changing the subject. He was giving my terror, my shame, and my rage a new direction. An external target. He had shattered me with Boston, and now he was offering to help me put the pieces back together, but in a new, monstrous shape. He was telling me what to do with all this poison he had dredged up. "No," I said, the word stronger this time. I can't." "Can't you?" The whisper was back in my head, cool and reasonable. "He keeps you up all night. You can't sleep. You can't work. He complains about your footsteps. He leaves his garbage in the hall. He is a problem, Jake. A little problem, and little problems need to be fixed before they become big problems." My heart was pounding. He was voicing the exact thoughts, the exact ugly justifications I had used myself. He was reading my own internal monologue back to me. He turned from the refrigerator and went to the large window in the living room. The rain was lashing against the glass now, the wind a high-pitched shriek. With one smooth, effortless motion, he unlocked it and slid it open. A blast of cold, wet air exploded into the apartment. The papers on my desk flew everywhere, a sudden blizzard of architectural plans and unpaid bills. The wind howled, a living thing now inside my home. Rain sprayed across the floor, cold and sharp. The room was instantly cleansed of its stale heat, replaced by the raw, violent energy of the storm. "What are you doing?" I yelled over the roar of the wind. Pip stood beside the open window, the rain plastering his dark hair to his pale forehead. He didn't seem to feel the cold. He looked serene. "Let's clean this place up a little," he whispered, and the sound cut right through the gale. He smiled then, a true smile this time, and it was the most horrific thing I had ever seen. It was the smile of a predator that knows the hunt is over. He walked over to my desk, where my phone lay screened down amidst the scattered papers. He picked it up. His small fingers, impossibly nimble, swiped and tapped. The screen's glow illuminated his face from below, casting long, dancing shadows. He walked back to me, holding the phone out. "You're an architect, Jake. You love buildings. You love knowing how they work." I looked down at the screen. He had opened a web browser. On the display was a grainy, scanned PDF. It was a floor plan, a blueprint. My eyes scanned the title block, my professional instincts kicking in before the horror could. Pre-war residential building, City Municipal Archives, 1928. It was this building. My building. His finger, small and pale, tapped the screen. It zoomed in on 2 stacked rectangles. Apartment 7B. My apartment. And directly below it, Apartment 6B. And next to that, 4B. His finger traced a line, a path. "These old buildings have secrets," he whispered, his voice a conspiratorial hiss against the wind. "They weren't built like they are now. They have ghosts in the walls, old dumbwaiters, shared ventilation shafts, things that connect people." His finger stopped on a small shaded square near the bathroom of 4B's plan. A note next to it read, "Plumbing Chase, access panel. The locks are cheap, a credit card would do it. But you wouldn't even need that. The fire escape landing for 7C has a clear view of his kitchen window. He leaves it unlocked. He smokes out there." My whole body went cold, a cold deeper than the rain. This wasn't a vague incitement. This was a plan. A detailed, practical, and terrifyingly plausible plan. He was showing me the schematics for a crime. He was giving me a how-to guide for ruining a man's life or ending it. He pushed the phone into my hand. My fingers closed around it reflexively. It felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. I stood there, in the middle of my living room, the wind and rain whipping around me. The evidence of my life's greatest shame was written in the dust on my bookshelf. A direct order was spelled out in children's magnets on my refrigerator, and in my hand, I held the map. Pip watched me, his dark eyes filled with a patient, terrible expectation. He had laid out all the pieces. He had cornered the king. Now, he was just waiting for me to make my move, to knock over my own pieces and start a new game entirely. His game. The sound of Mrs. Gable's coughing started up again next door. 3 sharp, hacking barks. It sounded louder now, amplified by the wind. It sounded like a judgment, or a countdown. The phone in my hand was a block of ice. My fingers were numb around it. The wind tore through the room, a physical assault, whipping my own failures into my face, unpaid bills dancing with rejected drafts. The blueprint on the screen was a map to a place I never wanted to go, a path I refused to see. 4B, a problem with a solution drawn in neat architectural lines. Too loud, the voice in my head whispered, a calm counterpoint to the gale. Too messy. People hear things. People ask questions. You're not good with questions, are you, Jake? Before I could form a reply, before my mind could even process the new line of attack, Pip moved. He drifted away from me, untouched by the chaos he had unleashed. He went to the open window. With a single fluid motion, he slid it shut. The lock clicked into place with a sound like a breaking bone. Silence. The roar of the storm was gone, replaced by a muffled, distant howl. The papers fluttered and settled on the floor. The sudden absence of sound was more jarring than the noise had been. It was a weighted silence, a vacuum that sucked the air from my lungs. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum in a soundproofed room. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Pip turned. He was no longer smiling. His face was a placid mask, his eyes dark pits. He did not look at the refrigerator. He did not look at the phone in my hand. He lifted one small, pale arm and pointed. A single, unwavering finger aimed at the wall I shared with Mrs. Gable. The coughing started again right on cue, a dry, hacking rhythm. Hack, hack, hack. It was a terrible, lonely sound. That's a problem too, isn't it? Pip's whisper was smooth, reasonable. It slithered into my mind like smoke under a door. That noise, all day, all night, like a clock ticking, reminding you, ticking, ticking, ticking. I stared at the wall. The plaster was cracked, a fine web of lines spreading from the corner. I thought of the old woman on the other side, alone, sick. A life reduced to a sound through a wall. She keeps a spare key under her mat, Pip said. The whisper was no longer just in my head. It felt like he was speaking right beside my ear, his breath a cold spot on my skin. I flinched, but he was still standing across the room. I checked. My muscles tensed up. You checked? The question was a silent scream. How? How could he check? How could he leave this room? My mind went blank. The logic I clung to, the desperate explanations of stress and hallucination, they all crumbled into dust. This was not a figment of my imagination. A figment of my imagination could not check for a key. She's old, Jake. Her heart is weak. The doctor told her last month. I heard. The walls are thin. He took a step towards me. His bare feet made no sound on the wood floor. She doesn't lock the deadbolt. Ever. just the knob. A credit card. Your library card would do it. But you don't even need that. The key is right there, under the worn-out welcome mat. He stopped a few feet away. His dark eyes held mine. He knew. He knew he was breaking me. He was dismantling my reality piece by piece. One good scare is all it would take. The whisper was seductive now. A promise. Just open the door. Stand there. In the dark. Let her see you. That's all. Her heart will do the rest. It will be natural. A tragedy. An old woman living alone. It happens all the time. My throat was dry. I tried to swallow, but there was nothing there. No, I managed, the word a rasp of static. No. No one would ever know, he continued, ignoring me. His voice was a lullaby of murder. No mess, no noise, just silence. Think of it, Jake. True silence. No more coughing. No more ticking. Ever. Get out, I said, my voice trembling. I took a step back, my hand still clutching the phone. My back pressed against the edge of my desk. Pip's expression did not change. He was patient. So terribly patient. He tilted his head, a gesture of mock sympathy. All right, he whispered. I'll go. A flicker of hope, so sharp and desperate it felt like pain shot through me. Could it be that easy? Could I just tell him to leave? But you have to do it. The hope died, strangled at birth. Do it, Jake, he hissed, the whisper turning sharp, a blade of ice. Make the coughing stop, and I will leave you alone. I will walk out that door, and you will never, ever see me again. I promise. He was offering me a deal, a pact, my soul for a quiet night, my sanity for a woman's life. I shook my head, a frantic, jerky motion. I couldn't. I was a lot of bad things, but I wasn't that. I wasn't a monster. Oh? The whisper was laced with a chilling amusement. Aren't you? He turned his head and glanced at the bookshelf, at the words etched in the dust. I know about Boston. My blood froze. I could feel the color drain from my face. Cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. He didn't have to say another word. The threat hung in the air, more potent and terrifying than any knife. If you don't do this, Pip said, his voice dropping, becoming intimate and cruel, well, then the promise is off. And if I stay, I get bored. And when I get bored, I like to talk to people. I could write a letter. I know where Sarah works. I know your father's new address in Florida. I could even post it online. Anonymous tip. The whole story. Every last detail. How the rain felt that night. The sound the fender made. The way you just drove away. Everyone finds out about Boston, Jake. I couldn't breathe. It felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing my chest. Boston. Not the memory, but the living, breathing thing that hunted me in my sleep. The slick asphalt under the streetlights. The terrible, hollow thud. The split-second decision that wasn't a decision at all, but a pure, cowardly reflex. The face I saw for a half second in the rearview mirror. The face I see every time I look at my own for too long. He was threatening to give that thing a voice, to let it out of its cage. Please, I begged. It was a pathetic sound, a shred of a word. Don't. Then you have a choice to make, he whispered. Her or you. Her quiet little life. Or your... Everything. He had me. He had me pinned. He had stripped away every lie I told myself, every layer of denial, and left me with the raw, ugly truth of my own self-preservation. What was I willing to do to keep my secret? What was one more sin, one more quiet horror to protect the original one? My eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, a weapon, anything. They landed on my desk. Amidst the scattered papers, next to a stack of blueprints, sat my paperweight. A heavy, clear globe of glass with a miniature detailed model of the courthouse I'd helped design suspended inside. A gift from my old firm. A symbol of a success that now felt like a lifetime ago. It was solid. It was heavy. Reflexively, I let the phone clatter to the desk and my hand closed around the glass sphere. It was cool and smooth. Its weight was real. It was an anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. I gripped it tighter, my knuckles turning white. The intricate building inside seemed to mock me. A monument to order and rules, held in the hand of a man about to break every rule there was. The coughing started again. Hack, 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 hack. Louder this time. Insistent. It was no longer the sound of a sick old woman. It was an accusation. It was the ticking clock of my ultimatum. Each cough was a second slipping away. Each hack was a nail in a coffin. Hers or mine? I stared at the front door of my apartment. It seemed miles away. It was just a door, a flimsy piece of wood and paint. But tonight, it was the gateway to hell. On the other side was a welcome mat, and under it, a key, and beyond that, a choice I couldn't make and couldn't escape. "She's a stranger, Jake," Pip whispered, his voice soft, coaxing. "You don't even know her first name. But Boston is you. It's the core of you. You let that out and there is no more Jake Miller. Just the monster that ran." He was right. God help me. He was right. My life, this hollowed-out, miserable excuse for a life, was built on that one terrible secret. Without it, the whole structure would collapse. I would lose my job. My family would disown me. Sarah. God, what would Sarah think? The shame was some physical thing, a sickness in my gut. I pushed myself off the desk. My legs were shaking uncontrollably, but they held me. I stood there, in the center of my wrecked apartment, holding the glass paperweight. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The entire world was in that small sphere. Her world. My gaze was fixed on the door. I saw the cheap brass of the doorknob. The peephole. A dark, judgmental eye staring back at me. The coughing next door stopped. The sudden silence was a gunshot. Then, a new sound. 3 sharp, distinct raps on the wall. Knock. 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 Mrs. Gable. Knocking. I looked at Pip. He was standing perfectly still, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. He raised his hand and pointed at the wall, in perfect sync with the sound. He had been right. She was listening. She was a part of this. This is impossible. My mind was screaming it. This isn't real. Wake up. Wake up, Jake. But I wasn't asleep. I was wider awake than I had ever been in my life. My head was spinning with a series of questions that had no answers. Who was he? What was he? A ghost? A demon? Or was he me? Was he the part of me that drove away that night in Boston, given a face and a voice? It didn't matter. The distinction was meaningless. Real or not, the choice was real. The consequences were real. I stood up straight. The shaking subsided, replaced by a profound, terrifying calm. My eyes felt wide, but I saw nothing but the path forward. It was a narrow, dark hallway, and at the end of it was a door. I looked down at the paperweight in my hand, then back at the door to my own apartment. My face was a blank slate. The conflict inside me, the frantic war between terror and morality, was over. A decision had been reached in the silent, ruined chambers of my soul. Survival had won. Walking step by step, I moved. My feet were steady. My hand was firm around the heavy glass. I did not look at Pip. I did not need to. I could feel his victory radiating off him like heat. I could feel his dark, ancient eyes on my back. I walked toward the door. The rational architect, the man who believed in blueprints and logic, was gone. The secret keeper, the coward, the monster was in control now. I was walking toward the door to save myself and to do the unthinkable. The world was glass, cool, smooth, and impossibly heavy in my palm. The intricate courthouse suspended within it, a monument of order and law, felt like a cruel joke. My hand was cramping around it, a vice grip. My knuckles were white bone. I was not holding a paperweight. I was holding a life, or what was left of mine. My legs were stone pillars. The shaking had stopped. A dead calm had settled deep in my marrow, a coldness that had nothing to do with the storm outside and everything to do with the decision inside. Survival. It was a simple, ugly word, a primary color in a world I had tried to paint with shades of gray. There were no more shades. There was only the path to the door. I did not look at Pip. I refused to give him the satisfaction, but I felt him. He was a patch of cold in the room, a distortion in the air. I could feel his gaze on my back, a physical pressure. It was a feeling of approval, of ownership. He had won. He had peeled me down to the core and found exactly what he knew was there, the hollow space where a conscience should be, the space that had been carved out on a rain-slicked road in Boston. My first step was a conscious effort, lifting my foot from the rug, feeling the worn fibers, then placing it on the bare, cool wood of the floor. The floorboard gave a low groan. It was the only sound in the universe. The coughing from next door was gone. The knocking was gone. The storm was a distant rumor. There was only the sound of my own movement, my own inexorable march. Step. The blueprints on the floor rustled as I passed them. A life's work. Plans for buildings with strong foundations and clear lines, all of it meaningless. A lie built on top of a bigger lie. Step. My eyes caught my reflection in the dark screen of the television. A tall, gaunt figure. A ghost in his own home. And for a split second, I saw him there, standing beside my reflection. Pip. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching, his dark eyes ancient and knowing, and next to him, fainter, almost transparent, was another figure, a boy of 8. Me. My younger self looked terrified, his small mouth open in a silent scream. His eyes were pleading with me. Run! The image vanished. A trick of the light. It had to be. My throat was dry. So dry. I tried to swallow, a painful, scraping motion. I was halfway to the door. My shadow stretched out long and thin before me, a dark finger pointing the way, pointing at the door, pointing at the solution. She's just a sound, Jake. Pip's whisper was back, no longer a coercive hiss, but a gentle, reassuring murmur now that I was obeying. It curled into my ear like a lover's secret. A noise that bothers you, like a dripping faucet. You wouldn't think twice about fixing a dripping faucet, would you? You'd get a wrench. You'd tighten the bolt. You'd make the noise stop. I flinched. The analogy was so simple, so clean, so monstrous. My mind went blank. The apathetic logic of it was a new kind of terror. He wasn't just appealing to my fear anymore. He was appealing to my exhaustion, my desire for it all to just end. The stress, the deadlines, the debt, the coughing, the ticking, the remembering. My free hand, the one not clutching the glass world, was trembling. I balled it into a fist, digging my nails into my own palm. I needed to feel something, anything other than this cold, horrifying purpose. The sharp sting was a small, distant anchor. It proved I was still here. I was still flesh and blood. I reached the door. It stood before me, a slab of cheap cream-colored paint. There were scuff marks near the bottom, a small chip near the lock from a time I'd been drunk and fumbled with. My keys. It was the mundane portal to an extraordinary damnation. My eyes fixed on the doorknob, a simple brass fixture, worn and tarnished. This is impossible. The thought screamed in the vacuum of my mind. My head was spinning with a series of questions that had no answers. Is this a stress-induced psychosis? Am I dreaming? Did I finally, completely break? What is this? What is he? It didn't matter. The brass was cold under my trembling fingers. The choice was made. I looked through the peephole. The distorted fisheye lens showed the hallway, dimly lit by a single caged emergency bulb far down the corridor. It smelled of boiled cabbage and dust. Across the hall was apartment 7B, Mrs. Gable's apartment, a brown door identical to mine. And there, on the floor in front of it, was a small, worn-out welcome mat, a faded picture of a cartoon cat on it. I checked. Pip's words echoed in my head. My blood froze. It was real. The mat was real, which meant the key was real, which meant he was real. A whimper escaped my lips. I forcefully covered my mouth with my free hand, stifling the sound. My whole body shook uncontrollably. This wasn't a hallucination. A hallucination couldn't know about the welcome mat. A hallucination couldn't orchestrate the knocking on the wall. This was something else. Something separate. Something that had gotten inside. My hand, the one holding the paperweight, felt slick with sweat. The glass globe was a lead weight, pulling me down, pulling me forward. My other hand, the one on the doorknob, turned. It took all my strength. The latch clicked, a sound like a gunshot in the utter stillness. It was deafening. I held my breath, listening, waiting for a sound from her apartment. Nothing. Just the low hum of the building around me. Slowly, cautiously, I pulled the door inward. It opened with a low, drawn-out creak. The sound of a coffin lid swinging open. The hallway air hit me. It was cooler than the air in my apartment. Heavier. It carried the scent of other lives, other miseries. I stood in the doorway, half in my world, half in the hall. A man on a precipice. The welcome mat across the way seemed to glow in the gloom. The key was under there. The end of the coughing was under there. The end of Boston was under there. My salvation was under there, hidden beneath a cartoon cat. Just a few more steps, Jake, the whisper encouraged. It's almost over. Then you can sleep. Then it will all be gone. I took a half step into the hallway. My bare foot touched the grimy, cold linoleum of the public space. It was a violation, a point of no return. The paperweight was raised slightly in my hand, not as a weapon, but as a commitment, a testament. This was what I had to do. This was the price. Her or me. I looked at her door. I imagined her inside. Old, weak, probably asleep in a chair. A sudden noise. A dark figure in her doorway. The shock. The weak heart giving out. It would be so easy. It would be so final. My gaze dropped to the glass sphere in my own hand. The perfect, tiny courthouse inside. A place of judgment. A place of consequences. And in that moment, something inside me tore. The calm shattered. The carefully constructed wall of self-preservation crumbled into dust. A wave of revulsion, so powerful it was physical, washed over me. What the hell am I doing? Who am I? Is this me? The man who stands in a dark hallway, holding a glass orb, about to frighten an old woman to death to cover up a hit and run from 15 years ago. The face from the rearview mirror flashed in my mind. The face of the man I hit. The shock. The pain. The accusation. Mrs. Gable's coughing. The lonely, sick sound. Sarah's voice on the phone. You sound just like you did back then. My father's voice. Grow up. The monster wasn't Pip. The monster was the thing he had unlocked. The thing that had been there all along. The thing that had driven me to this doorway. No. The word was a tectonic shift in my soul. No. Not this. I am a coward. I am a liar. I am a man haunted by a terrible secret. But I am not this. Not a killer. My hand, as if with a will of its own, opened. It was not a decision, but a spasm. A final, desperate rebellion of my body against my mind. Reflexively, I let go. The glass paperweight, the little world of order and law, fell from my grasp. It did not make a single, clean sound. It struck the wooden threshold of my doorway with a loud, sharp crack as the outer sphere fractured, followed instantly by a sickening, explosive clatter as it bounced and shattered against the floor inside my apartment. The sound was a bomb going off in the tomb-like building. 100 tiny shards of glass, and the miniature courthouse skittered across the floor into the darkness of my home. Silence. For 1/2 second, there was an absolute ringing silence. My heart stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the glittering ruin on my floor. I had done it. I had broken it. I had said no. Then it came. It wasn't a cough. It wasn't a knock. It was from across the hall, from behind apartment 7B's door. A single, sharp, terrified gasp, followed immediately by a piercing, throat-tearing scream that ripped through the silence of the hallway and clawed directly at my soul.